The little girl's worn sneakers made soft sounds against the pristine sidewalk as she bent down to pick up a crumpled candy wrapper, her small fingers working carefully to stuff it into a torn plastic bag that had seen better days. From behind the tall windows of his mansion, wealthy businessman Robert Chen watched with growing curiosity as this child methodically cleaned his neighborhood street by street, day after day. He had no idea that her simple answer to his question would shatter everything he thought he knew about loss, love, and what it truly means to honor the memory of someone you've lost forever. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button for more real, emotional, life-changing stories like this. And let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The morning sun cast long shadows across Willowbrook Heights, one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in the city, where manicured lawns stretched like green carpets and luxury cars sat gleaming in circular driveways. The houses here weren't just homes, they were statements, each one more impressive than the last, with their towering columns, wrought iron gates, and perfectly trimmed hedges that spoke of wealth and status. It was the kind of place where every blade of grass seemed to have been positioned with intention, where the very air felt different, cleaner somehow, as if prosperity itself could purify the atmosphere. Into this world of perfection walked 8-year-old Maya Santos, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail that had come loose on one side, her clothes clean but clearly second-hand, the kind that mothers wash carefully and mend with love when the seams begin to fray. She carried with her a plastic grocery bag that had been used so many times it had developed thin spots and small tears. But she handled it with the care of someone who understood that even broken things could still serve a purpose if treated with respect. Maya moved with the methodical precision of someone much older, her young eyes scanning the sidewalks and gutters with the intensity of a detective searching for clues. Every few steps, she would pause, bend down, and retrieve something that didn't belong. A piece of litter that had somehow found its way into this pristine neighborhood, despite the best efforts of the professional landscaping crews that maintained these streets with military precision. From his study window on the second floor of his Georgian-style mansion, Robert Chen found himself drawn to watch this small figure who appeared on his street with the regularity of sunrise. At 52, Robert had built an empire in real estate development, transforming empty lots into shopping centers and office buildings that generated millions in revenue. His success had afforded him this house, this neighborhood, this life of comfort and luxury that most people could only dream of. Yet something about this little girl's daily ritual stirred something in him that he couldn't quite identify, a feeling that had been dormant for so long he had almost forgotten it existed. Robert had moved to Willowbrook Heights 5 years ago, after his divorce was finalized, and he needed a fresh start in a place where no one knew his story, where he could rebuild his life without the constant reminders of what he had lost. The house was too big for one person, with 6 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms, a gourmet kitchen that rarely saw use beyond reheating takeout, and a dining room table that seated 12 but had never hosted a dinner party. He had chosen it not for its warmth or character, but for its impressive facade and prestigious address. The kind of property that looked good in business magazines and made clients take him more seriously. But watching Maya work her way down the street, her small hands carefully collecting cigarette butts and food wrappers with the same attention she might give to gathering flowers, Robert found himself questioning things he had never questioned before. Why did this child care so much about keeping clean a neighborhood that wasn't even hers? Where were her parents, and why wasn't she in school during these morning hours when she made her rounds? Most puzzling of all, why did watching her fill him with a strange mixture of admiration and melancholy that he couldn't shake? The first time Robert had noticed Maya was 3 weeks ago on a Tuesday morning in early spring. He had been drinking his coffee and reviewing financial reports when movement outside caught his eye. At first glance, he had assumed she was just another child walking to school, perhaps taking a shortcut through his affluent neighborhood. But as he watched, he realized she wasn't walking with purpose toward a destination. She was stopping every few feet, picking things up, examining the ground with the careful attention of someone on a mission. Over the following days, Robert found himself looking forward to Maya's appearances with an anticipation that surprised him. She came at roughly the same time each morning, around 9 o'clock when the commuter traffic had died down and the streets were quiet except for the occasional delivery truck or maintenance vehicle. She always carried the same battered plastic bag, and she always worked with the same quiet determination, as if she were performing some sacred duty that no one else could understand. Robert began to adjust his morning routine to accommodate this new interest. He would position himself at the window with his coffee and laptop, ostensibly working but actually watching Maya's progress down the street. He noticed that she had a system. Starting at the corner where Maple Avenue intersected with his street, Elm Drive, and working her way methodically toward the cul-de-sac at the far end. She never skipped a section, never hurried, never seemed to grow tired or frustrated, even when her bag grew heavy with collected debris. There was something almost meditative about the way Maya moved, a peacefulness that seemed to radiate from her small frame as she bent and straightened, her movements creating a rhythm that was hypnotic to watch. Robert found that observing her brought him a sense of calm that he hadn't experienced in years, as if her simple act of service was somehow soothing not just the neighborhood, but his own troubled spirit. The residents of Willowbrook Heights were largely unaware of Maya's presence. Most of them left early for work and returned late, their days consumed by careers and social obligations that kept them insulated from the quieter rhythms of their own neighborhood. The few who might have noticed a child picking up trash would likely have dismissed it as community service or assumed she was someone else's responsibility. This was a place where people minded their own business, where privacy was valued above community engagement, where the shy, unspoken rule was that as long as property values remained high and crime remained low, everything else was someone else's concern. But Robert found himself becoming increasingly protective of Maya, watching not just her work, but also scanning the street for any potential dangers or disruptions. When Mrs. Hamilton's gardening crew arrived with their loud leaf blowers and industrial-grade lawn mowers, Robert found himself hoping they would finish their work before Maya appeared. When the teenage son of the family at the end of the street roared past in his sports car, music blaring and engine revving, Robert felt a surge of irritation at the thoughtless noise that might disturb Maya's peaceful routine. This protective instinct puzzled Robert, because he had never considered himself particularly fond of children. His own marriage had ended partly because he and his ex-wife couldn't agree on starting a family. She desperately wanted children, while he felt his career demanded too much of his time and energy to be a good father. Now, watching Maya work with such dedication and purpose, he began to wonder if he had been wrong about himself, if there was some paternal instinct buried deep within him that had simply never been awakened. As the days passed, Robert's curiosity about Maya grew stronger. He began to notice small details that painted a picture of her life beyond these morning cleaning sessions. Her clothes, while clean and well-maintained, were clearly not expensive, the kind of practical garments that prioritized durability over fashion. Her sneakers had been repaired with duct tape where the sole had begun to separate, a fix that spoke of a family that made do with what they had, rather than replacing things when they wore out. Despite these signs of modest means, Maya carried herself with a dignity that impressed Robert. She never hurried past the grand houses, as if intimidated by their opulence, never stared with envy at the luxury cars or elaborate landscaping. Instead, she seemed to view the entire neighborhood as worthy of her care and attention, treating each piece of litter she collected as if she were performing a service not just for the residents, but for the community as a whole. Robert began to research local schools, wondering if Maya should be in class during the hours when she made her rounds. He discovered that the elementary school nearest to Willowbrook Heights operated on a traditional schedule, with classes beginning at 8:30 in the morning and ending at 3:15 in the afternoon. This meant that Maya's 9 o'clock appearances were happening during school hours, raising questions about her educational situation that made Robert increasingly uncomfortable. Was Maya truant, skipping school to wander the streets? Was she homeschooled, following a different schedule than traditional students? Was she perhaps recovering from an illness that kept her out of regular classes? Or, and this thought troubled Robert most of all, was she in some kind of trouble at home that prevented her from attending school regularly? These questions gnawed at Robert throughout his workdays, distracting him from client meetings and financial projections as he found himself wondering about the circumstances that would lead a child to spend her mornings cleaning streets instead of sitting in a classroom, learning math and science. He considered calling the school district to report a possible truancy case, but something held him back, a sense that Maya's story was more complicated than it appeared, and that involving authorities might do more harm than good. The turning point came on a Thursday morning in late April, when Robert witnessed something that changed his entire perspective on Maya's activities. He was at his usual post by the window, watching Maya work her way down the street with her characteristic patience and thoroughness, when she stopped at a spot near the storm drain that caught his attention. Instead of simply picking up the piece of litter she had spotted, Maya knelt down and spent several minutes examining something, her small hands moving with careful precision as she worked. Robert found himself leaning closer to the window, trying to see what had captured Maya's attention so completely. From his second-floor vantage point, he could see that she was carefully untangling what appeared to be a small bunch of flowers from some discarded plastic packaging. The flowers were clearly artificial, the kind sold at dollar stores and gas stations, their bright colors faded from exposure to sun and rain. Most people would have considered them trash, worthless decorations that had outlived their purpose and deserved nothing more than a trip to the nearest garbage can. But Maya treated these bedraggled flowers with the reverence most people reserved for priceless artifacts. She gently separated them from the plastic that had trapped them, smoothing out their wrinkled petals and straightening their bent stems with the care of a museum curator handling ancient treasures. When she was satisfied with their condition, she didn't put them in her trash bag with the other debris she had collected. Instead, she held them close to her chest for a moment, her lips moving in what appeared to be a whispered conversation, before carefully placing them in a small pocket of her jacket. This tender scene struck Robert with unexpected force, stirring emotions he had spent years trying to suppress. The sight of this child treating discarded flowers as if they were precious gifts reminded him of his own childhood, of simpler times when small gestures carried enormous meaning, and the value of something wasn't determined by its price tag, but by the love with which it was given or received. Robert's younger brother David had been like that, able to find beauty and meaning in the most humble objects. The kind of person who collected smooth stones from the beach, not because they were worth anything, but because their texture and color spoke to him in some indefinable way. David had died in a car accident 15 years ago, when Robert was just beginning his climb up the corporate ladder, and in the busy years that followed, Robert had pushed away most memories of his brother's gentle nature, finding them too painful to revisit. But watching Maya cradle those artificial flowers brought David back to him with startling clarity. Not just the fact of his death, but the essence of who he had been in life, the way he had moved through the world with open hands and an open heart, always ready to find something worth treasuring in the most unlikely places. Robert felt tears building in his eyes, the first he had shed for his brother in years. And he realized that Maya's daily ritual of cleaning the streets wasn't just about removing litter. It was about caring for the world in a way that most adults had forgotten how to do. This revelation filled Robert with a sense of urgency he couldn't ignore. He needed to know more about Maya, needed to understand what drove her to perform this daily act of service with such dedication and love. But more than that, he needed to tell her that her work mattered, that someone had noticed and appreciated the gift she was giving to the world every morning when she walked these streets with her torn plastic bag and her boundless capacity for caring. The next morning, Robert found himself pacing his living room as 9 o'clock approached, rehearsing what he might say to Maya when she appeared. He had never been comfortable with spontaneous conversations, preferring the structured environment of business meetings where agendas and objectives were clearly defined. But something about Maya's presence demanded a different kind of interaction, one that couldn't be planned or scripted, but had to emerge naturally from genuine human connection. When Maya rounded the corner onto Elm Drive, Robert felt his heart rate quicken with nervous anticipation. He watched her begin her methodical progress down the street, stopping to collect a fast food wrapper here, a cigarette butt there, her movements as graceful and purposeful as ever. As she drew closer to his house, Robert made a decision that surprised him with its spontaneity. He was going to step outside and introduce himself. Robert had always been a man who valued control, who preferred to observe and analyze before taking action. His success in business had come from his ability to study markets and demographics, to understand his clients' needs before they understood them themselves, to move with calculated precision rather than impulsive emotion. But Maya's presence in his neighborhood had awakened something in him that couldn't be managed or strategized, a simple human desire to connect with another person who seemed to understand something about life that he had lost along the way. As Maya worked her way past the Hendersons' perfectly manicured lawn and approached the edge of Robert's property, he found himself walking toward his front door with steps that felt both determined and uncertain. He had no idea what he was going to say to this child, no plan for how to bridge the gap between his world of wealth and privilege and her world of humble service and quiet dignity. All he knew was that he couldn't continue to watch from his window like a stranger, that Maya's daily gift to the neighborhood deserved acknowledgement from someone who had been touched by her generosity. Robert opened his front door and stepped onto his covered porch, the morning air cool against his face as he took in the familiar sounds and scents of his neighborhood from this new perspective. From street level, Willowbrook Heights looked different, less like a fortress of wealth, and more like a community of homes where people lived their daily lives with all the complexity and messiness that entailed. He could hear the distant hum of traffic from the main road, the chirping of birds in the ancient oak trees that lined the street, the quiet rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze that carried the faint scent of the flowering trees that marked the full arrival of spring. Maya was 3 houses away now, working her way systematically toward him, with the patient focus that had captivated him for weeks. Robert found himself studying her more closely than he had been able to do from his window, noticing details that distance had obscured. Her dark hair was neatly braided despite the loose strands that had escaped to frame her face, suggesting that someone cared enough to help her prepare for her day, even if that someone couldn't afford expensive clothes or new shoes. Her movements were economical and efficient. No energy wasted on unnecessary motions, the kind of practiced grace that comes from performing the same task many times, with full attention to the work. As Maya approached the invisible boundary where Robert's property met the public sidewalk, she looked up and noticed him standing on his porch. For a moment, their eyes met across the distance that separated them, and Robert felt a jolt of recognition that had nothing to do with familiarity and everything to do with the sudden awareness that he was looking at someone who understood something profound about the world that he was only beginning to glimpse. Maya's expression showed no surprise at seeing him, no shyness or apprehension that might be expected from a child encountering a stranger. Instead, she offered him a small smile and a polite nod, the kind of greeting that acknowledged his presence without assuming anything about his intentions. It was a response that spoke of maturity beyond her years, of someone who had learned to navigate the adult world with caution and respect, but without fear. Robert stepped down from his porch and walked slowly toward the sidewalk, his hands in his pockets to appear as non-threatening as possible. As he drew closer to Maya, he was struck by how small she actually was, how delicate her features appeared now that he could see them clearly. But there was nothing fragile about the way she carried herself, nothing that suggested she needed protection or pity. Instead, she radiated a quiet strength that reminded Robert of deeply rooted trees that could bend in strong winds without breaking. "Good morning," Robert said, his voice carrying more warmth than he had intended, surprising himself with the genuine pleasure he felt at finally speaking to this child who had become such an important part of his daily routine. "Good morning, sir," Maya replied, her voice clear and polite, with just a hint of curiosity about why this well-dressed man had emerged from his impressive house to greet her. She didn't stop her work, continuing to scan the ground for litter as she spoke, but she gave him her attention in a way that suggested she was comfortable with adult conversation. Robert found himself momentarily at a loss for words, all his rehearsed opening lines suddenly seeming inadequate for the moment. Instead, he heard himself asking the question that had been consuming his thoughts for weeks, the simple inquiry that would change both their lives in ways neither could imagine. "I've been watching you clean the street every morning," Robert said, then quickly added, "I hope that doesn't sound strange. I work from home, and I've noticed how carefully you pick up litter. I'm curious, why do you do this? Why is it important to you?" Maya looked up at him with eyes that seemed much older than her 8 years, eyes that held depths of understanding that made Robert feel as if he were speaking to someone who had lived through experiences far beyond what any child should face. She was quiet for a moment, considering his question with the seriousness it deserved, and Robert found himself holding his breath as he waited for her answer. "It makes the world prettier for my brother in heaven," Maya said simply, her voice carrying a matter-of-fact acceptance that hit Robert like a physical blow. "He always said that when we take care of beautiful things, they take care of us back. Even if he can't see it anymore, I think he knows when I'm making things nice." The words hung in the air between them, simple and profound in the way that only truth could be. Robert felt his chest tighten with emotion as Maya's explanation washed over him, carrying with it all the grief and love and hope that a child could pack into a single sentence. He understood now why Maya's daily ritual had moved him so deeply, why watching her work had stirred feelings he had thought were safely buried. She was doing what he had never been able to do for David, keeping his memory alive through acts of service and love. "I'm sorry about your brother," Robert said, his voice rougher than usual as he struggled to maintain his composure. "That's a beautiful way to remember him." Maya nodded, accepting his sympathy with the same grace she had shown in greeting him. "Thank you. He was really good at seeing pretty things that other people missed, like how puddles can look like mirrors, or how old leaves make music when you walk through them. I try to see things the way he did." Robert felt something shift inside him, a door opening that had been locked for years. This child's simple wisdom was illuminating corners of his heart that he had deliberately kept in darkness, showing him possibilities for healing and connection that he had convinced himself were beyond his reach. Maya wasn't just cleaning streets, she was practicing a form of love that transformed ordinary acts into sacred rituals, finding ways to honor the dead while serving the living. "How old was your brother?" Robert asked gently, drawing into Maya's story despite his usual reluctance to discuss personal matters with strangers. "He was 11 when he got sick," Maya said, her voice steady but softer now. "The doctors said his body wasn't strong enough to fight the sickness, but his heart was really strong. He told me that when people we love go to heaven, they can still feel it when we do nice things. So I try to do nice things every day." Robert felt tears threatening again, moved not just by Maya's loss, but by her response to it. Where his own grief had led him to withdraw from the world, to focus on accumulation and achievement as a way of avoiding the pain of connection, Maya had chosen the opposite path. She had taken her brother's death as an invitation to love more deeply, to serve more faithfully, to find ways of keeping his spirit alive through her own actions. "That's very wise," Robert said, meaning it completely. "Your brother was lucky to have a sister who loves him so much." Maya smiled then, the first truly radiant expression Robert had seen from her, and it transformed her entire face with joy. "He always said I was his favorite person in the whole world. I want to make sure he still feels that way." The simplicity of this statement, delivered with such pure intention, broke something open in Robert's chest. He found himself thinking of David, of all the ways he had failed to honor his brother's memory, all the opportunities he had missed to keep David's spirit alive through acts of love and service. Maya, at 8 years old, understood something about grief and healing that Robert, at 52, was only beginning to grasp. "Would you like some help?" Robert heard himself asking, the words emerging from some deep place he hadn't known existed. "I could get another bag. Or maybe some gloves to protect your hands." Maya looked surprised by the offer, tilting her head as she studied Robert's face, as if trying to determine whether he was serious. "You want to help pick up trash?" "I think I do," Robert said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "If you don't mind the company." Maya considered this for a moment, then nodded solemnly. "My brother always said that helping makes people feel good inside. You can help if you want to." Robert felt a smile spreading across his face, the first genuine smile he could remember in months. "Wait here. I'll be right back." He hurried back to his house, his steps lighter than they had been in years. In his garage, he found a box of contractor-grade garbage bags and a pair of work gloves he had bought for a landscaping project he never completed. As he gathered these supplies, Robert felt a sense of anticipation building in him that reminded him of childhood Christmas mornings, the breathless excitement of beginning something new and wonderful. When he returned to the sidewalk, Maya was waiting patiently, her own torn bag clutched in her small hands. Robert offered her the gloves, which were far too large for her, but she accepted them gravely, and worked them onto her hands with the determination of someone who never complained about making do with what was available. "Thank you," she said, flexing her fingers in the oversized gloves. "These will help a lot." As they began working together, Robert found himself experiencing his neighborhood from an entirely new perspective. Walking at Maya's pace, stopping to examine every piece of litter with the attention it deserved, he began to notice details that had been invisible to him before. The way morning light caught in the dewdrops on spider webs stretched between fence posts. The intricate patterns of bark on the old oak trees that had been growing in this area since before the subdivision was built. The careful way someone had arranged river stones around the base of a mailbox, creating a small garden that spoke of love for beautiful things. Maya worked with the same methodical patience she had shown every morning, but now she began to share her observations with Robert, pointing out things that caught her attention or explaining her system for determining what needed to be collected and what could be left alone. She had developed a sophisticated understanding of her environment, able to distinguish between litter that was truly trash and natural debris that belonged in the landscape. "See how this leaf is still green?" Maya said, kneeling beside a storm drain where several leaves had collected. "It just fell down from being windy, but it's not really trash. But this wrapper is different. It doesn't belong here, so we should take it." Robert found himself marveling at Maya's ability to make these distinctions, her intuitive understanding of what belonged in the natural world and what had been introduced by human carelessness. Her approach to cleaning the streets wasn't about removing everything that seemed out of place, but about restoring a kind of harmony between the human-made environment and the natural systems that surrounded it. As they worked their way down the street together, Robert began to feel a sense of peace settling over him that he hadn't experienced in years. The rhythmic motion of walking and stopping, bending and straightening, created a meditative quality that quieted the constant chatter of his business-focused mind. For the first time in months, he wasn't thinking about market projections or client demands, or the endless stream of decisions that normally occupied his thoughts. Instead, he was simply present in the moment, focused on the simple task of caring for his community alongside this remarkable child. Maya seemed to sense the change in Robert's mood, glancing up at him occasionally with small smiles that suggested she was pleased to have company in her work. She began to share more of her thoughts as they walked, telling him about the different birds she had learned to identify by their calls, pointing out houses where she had noticed particularly beautiful gardens, describing the way the light looked different at various times of day as the sun moved across the sky. "My brother taught me to notice things," Maya explained, as they paused near a flowering dogwood tree that was just beginning to show its spring blossoms. He said that most people walk around with their eyes closed, not because they can't see, but because they forget to pay attention. He said that paying attention was like giving a present to the world. Robert found himself thinking about this idea as they continued their work. How long had it been since he had truly paid attention to anything beyond his immediate business concerns? When was the last time he had noticed the changing seasons, the play of light and shadow, the small daily miracles that surrounded him but went unacknowledged? Maya's brother had understood something profound about the art of living, and Maya was keeping that wisdom alive through her own practice of mindful attention. They had been working together for about an hour when Maya's plastic bag finally gave way completely, the accumulated weight of debris tearing through the thin material and spilling its contents onto the sidewalk. Robert watched as Maya's face fell, her disappointment clear as she knelt to gather up the scattered litter with her hands. "It's okay," Robert said quickly, opening his box of contractor bags and shaking one out. "Here, let's use this instead. It's much stronger." Maya looked up at him with gratitude that seemed disproportionate to the simple gesture. "Thank you. I've been trying to make that bag last as long as possible, but I guess it was just too tired." The phrase struck Robert as perfectly capturing Maya's gentle approach to the world, her ability to see even inanimate objects as deserving of consideration and respect. A tired bag, not a broken one. The distinction revealed something beautiful about the way Maya's mind worked, her instinct to extend compassion even to things that most people would dismiss as worthless. As they transferred the collected litter to the new bag, Robert found himself asking the question that had been building in his mind all morning. "Maya, can I ask you something? Should you be in school right now?" Maya's hands stilled for a moment, and Robert saw a flicker of something, sadness perhaps, or resignation, cross her young face. "I do school at home with my mama," she said quietly. "She works nights, so she sleeps in the morning. I do my lessons in the afternoon when she wakes up." The explanation raised more questions than it answered, but Robert sensed that Maya's home situation was complicated, in ways that required delicate handling. "That sounds like it works well for your family," he said carefully. "Your mama must be proud of the way you take care of the neighborhood." Maya's face brightened at this. "She says I have a good heart like my brother did. Sometimes she comes with me on weekends, and we work together. She's really good at seeing things that need to be fixed." Robert found himself curious about Maya's mother. This woman who was raising such a remarkable child under what were clearly challenging circumstances. Working nights while homeschooling during the day suggested a life of constant adaptation and sacrifice, the kind of juggling act that single parents performed with heroic determination every day. The fact that Maya had turned out so thoughtful and caring spoke volumes about the quality of love and guidance she received at home. "I'd like to meet your mama sometime," Robert said, then quickly added, "If that would be okay with both of you, maybe I could help with your school supplies or something like that." Maya studied his face with the careful attention she gave to everything else, as if trying to determine whether his offer came from genuine kindness or some other motive. After a moment, she nodded slowly. "I think she'd like that. She always says it's important to know good people in the neighborhood." They finished collecting the spilled litter and continued their work down the street, falling into a comfortable rhythm that felt as natural as if they had been doing this together for years. Robert found himself telling Maya about his own childhood, about growing up in a small town where everyone knew their neighbors and community service was simply part of daily life. He hadn't thought about those early years in decades, but being with Maya brought back memories of a simpler time when helping others was considered as natural as breathing. "My grandmother used to say that the world was like a big garden," Robert found himself sharing. "She said that everyone had to do their part to keep it beautiful, even if it was just pulling a few weeds or watering some flowers. I think I forgot about that somewhere along the way." Maya nodded seriously. "My brother said something like that too. He said that taking care of things was how we showed love to people we didn't even know yet. Like maybe someone will walk down the street tomorrow and feel happy because it's clean and pretty, and they won't know why, but they'll feel good inside." The wisdom in this simple statement took Robert's breath away. Maya's brother had understood something profound about the ripple effects of kindness, the way small acts of service could touch strangers' lives in ways that might never be fully known or acknowledged. It was a form of faith, really, the belief that love expressed through action had the power to transform the world in ways both seen and unseen. As they reached the end of Elm Drive and stood looking back at the street they had cleaned together, Robert felt a sense of accomplishment that was different from anything he had experienced in his business career. The financial deals he negotiated might generate more money, the buildings he developed might house more people, but this simple act of caring for his community had touched something deeper in him than professional success ever had. "Maya," he said, "would you mind if I asked you about your brother? What was his name?" Maya's face lit up with the joy that always appeared when she talked about her brother. "His name was Alex. Alexander Miguel Santos. But everyone called him Alex. He was the best brother in the whole world." "Tell me more about him," Robert said, settling onto a bench that overlooked the small park at the end of the street. "What kinds of things did he like to do?" Maya sat beside him, her small legs swinging as she gathered her thoughts. "He loved to draw pictures of things he saw outside. Birds and flowers and clouds that looked like animals. He said that drawing was like taking a photograph with his heart instead of a camera. And he liked to make up stories about the people we saw walking by. Like maybe that lady with the red coat was really a secret princess, or that man with the briefcase was carrying magic spells to help sick people get better." Robert found himself smiling at these glimpses into Alex's imagination, recognizing in Maya's descriptions a child who had possessed the kind of creative spirit that could find wonder in the most ordinary moments. "He sounds like he was very creative." "He was," Maya said, her voice warm with memory. "Even when he got really sick and had to stay in the hospital, He would make up games for us to play with just words. Like we would pretend we were explorers in a jungle, and he would describe all the amazing animals were seeing, and I would have to guess what they were. He made being in that scary place feel like an adventure. The image of a sick child using his imagination to comfort his little sister struck Robert with fresh grief, both for Maya's loss and for his own. David had been like that too, able to find light in dark places, to transform difficulty into opportunity for deeper connection. Robert realized that he had spent so many years running from the pain of David's death, that he had also run from the joy of David's life, cutting himself off from the very memories that could have sustained him through his grief. "Alex sounds like he was a lot like my brother David," Robert said, surprised by his own willingness to share this connection. David died when he was 26, in a car accident. He was the kind of person who could make anyone feel better just by being around him. Maya looked at him with sudden understanding, her eyes reflecting a depth of empathy that seemed impossible for someone so young. "Is that why you looked sad when you were watching me from your window? Because seeing me made you think about your brother?" Robert was startled by Maya's perceptiveness, her ability to read emotions and connections that he had thought were hidden. "Yes," he said simply. "I think that's exactly why. You reminded me of how much David loved to take care of people and make things better. I'd forgotten how good that felt." Maya reached over and patted Robert's hand with the unself-conscious comfort that children offered naturally. "I think when people we love go to heaven, they send us other people to remind us of them. Maybe your brother sent me to help you remember the good parts." The simplicity of this theology, delivered with such genuine conviction, moved Robert more than any sermon he had ever heard. Maya's understanding of loss and healing was uncomplicated by doubt or cynicism, rooted in the kind of faith that could see divine purpose in chance encounters and find hope in the darkest circumstances. "Maybe he did," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. "Maybe they both did." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the morning sun climb higher in the sky and listening to the sounds of the neighborhood waking up around them. Robert found himself thinking about the profound shift that had occurred in his understanding of his own life in the space of just a few hours. Meeting Maya had cracked open something in him that had been sealed shut for years, allowing light to enter spaces that had been dominated by shadow and regret. "Maya," Robert said finally, "I have an idea. What if we could create something beautiful to honor both Alex and David? Something that would make the whole neighborhood prettier, the way your brother wanted." Maya turned to him with interest, her eyes bright with curiosity. "What kind of something?" Robert looked around at the small park where they were sitting, taking in its worn playground equipment and sparse landscaping with new eyes. "What if we could turn this park into something really special? Add more flowers and trees, maybe some benches where families could sit together. A memorial garden that would honor Alex and David and everyone else who's watching over us from heaven?" Maya's eyes widened with excitement, her whole body practically vibrating with enthusiasm. "Really? We could do that? Make a garden for Alex?" "I think we could," Robert said, his mind already beginning to work through the logistics and possibilities. "I know people who design parks and gardens. We could create something beautiful that would last for a long time, something that would make everyone who visits it feel a little bit happier." Maya jumped up from the bench, her hands clasped together in front of her chest. "Alex would love that so much. He always said that gardens were like prayers you could see. Oh, Mr. Robert, that would be the most wonderful thing ever." Robert felt his heart swell at Maya's joy, but he also felt a flutter of nervousness about the commitment he was making. Renovating a public park would be a complex undertaking, requiring permits and approvals from the city, coordination with multiple contractors and designers, and a significant financial investment. But looking at Maya's radiant face, seeing the hope and excitement shining in her eyes, Robert knew that he would move mountains to make this happen. "There's just one thing," Robert said gently. "Before we start planning anything, I really need to meet your mama and make sure she's comfortable with all of this. This is a big project, and I want to make sure your family is okay with me being involved." Maya nodded vigorously, her ponytail bouncing with the motion. "Yes, yes, you should meet Mama. She's going to love you, I know it. She always says that good things happen when people care about each other, And you care about making things beautiful just like Alex did. Robert felt a warmth spreading through his chest at Maya's words, a sense of belonging and purpose that had been missing from his life for longer than he cared to admit. The child's simple faith in the goodness of human connection was infectious, awakening in him a desire to live up to her expectations, to become the kind of person who deserved her trust and friendship. When would be a good time to meet her? Robert asked. I don't want to interrupt her sleep if she works nights. Maya thought for a moment, counting on her fingers in a way that reminded Robert of how young she really was despite her mature observations about life and loss. She usually wakes up around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Maybe you could come over for tea? She always makes tea when she wakes up, and she says it tastes better when you share it with friends. Ah? The invitation to tea felt like a bridge between worlds, a chance for Robert to step into Maya's life and understand the circumstances that had shaped such a remarkable child. He found himself both eager and nervous about meeting the woman who had raised Maya with such wisdom and compassion, despite what were clearly challenging circumstances. I would be honored to have tea with you and your mama, Robert said formally, causing Maya to giggle at his serious tone. You don't have to be so fancy, Maya said, her eyes twinkling with amusement. Mama says that the best friends are the ones who can be comfortable in your kitchen without pretending to be someone they're not. Robert laughed, feeling some of his tension ease. Your mama sounds very wise. I'll try to remember that. As they walked back toward Robert's house, their morning's work complete, Robert found himself seeing his neighborhood through entirely new eyes. The streets that had seemed so perfect and pristine from his window now revealed themselves as a living community, a place where children grew up and families made memories, where small acts of kindness could ripple outward in ways that transformed not just the physical environment, but the hearts of everyone who participated in the caring. Maya chattered happily as they walked, pointing out details she had noticed during their cleaning expedition, sharing stories about the different houses and the glimpses of life she had observed during her daily rounds. Robert realized that Maya knew more about the actual life of Willowbrook Heights than he did, despite having lived here for 5 years. She had been paying attention while he had been hiding behind his windows in his busy schedule, missing the human connections that were happening right outside his door. When they reached Robert's house, Maya stopped and looked up at the imposing structure with curiosity rather than intimidation. It's really big, she observed matter-of-factly. Do you live here all by yourself? The question struck Robert with unexpected poignancy. Yes, I do. It is pretty big for one person. Maya nodded thoughtfully. My brother always said that big houses were meant to be filled with people who love each other. Maybe that's why you were lonely watching from your window. Houses get sad when they're too empty. The insight, delivered with Maya's characteristic blend of wisdom and innocence, hit Robert like a physical blow. She had identified the source of his discontent with startling accuracy. His house wasn't just too big. It was too empty, lacking the warmth and connection that could transform a structure into a home. I think your brother was right about that too, Robert said quietly. Maybe that's something I need to work on changing. Maya smiled up at him with the kind of uncomplicated affection that children offered to adults who had earned their trust. I think you're already changing it. You came outside today instead of staying by the window. That's a good start. As Maya prepared to leave, promising to ask her mother about the tea invitation, Robert felt a sense of anticipation building that he hadn't experienced in years. The prospect of meeting Maya's mother, of learning more about the family that had produced such a remarkable child, filled him with both excitement and nervousness. He wanted to make a good impression, to prove himself worthy of the trust Maya had placed in him. Maya, Robert called as she started to walk away. Thank you for letting me help you today. It meant more to me than you know. Maya turned back with a smile that seemed to light up the entire street. Thank you for wanting to help. Alex always said that the best way to feel better when you're sad is to make someone else feel better when they're sad. I think we both felt better today. As Robert watched Maya disappear around the corner, her small figure carrying the large contractor bag with obvious pride, he felt a transformation beginning in his heart that he could barely comprehend. This child had taken his carefully ordered world and turned it upside down in the most beautiful way possible, showing him that there were forms of wealth that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with the connections we forge with other human beings. Robert spent the rest of the day in a state of restless energy, unable to focus on work as his mind kept returning to his conversation with Maya and the possibilities that lay ahead. He found himself walking through his empty house with new awareness, seeing it not as a symbol of his success, but as a daya resource that could be used to serve others, to create the kind of community connections that Maya's brother had understood so well. The next morning, Robert was at his window earlier than usual, eager to see Maya begin her daily routine. When she appeared at 9 o'clock, she waved enthusiastically at his house, apparently confident that he would be watching for her. Robert waved back, then grabbed his work gloves and headed outside to join her, feeling like a child himself as he anticipated another morning of purposeful work and meaningful conversation. Maya greeted him with the easy familiarity of an old friend, immediately launching into a report about her conversation with her mother the previous evening. "Mama says she would love to meet you. She's very excited about the tea, and she wants to know if you like sugar cookies because she's going to make some special ones for you." Robert felt his heart warm at this welcome, touched by the generosity of a woman he had never met, who was willing to open her home to a stranger based solely on her daughter's recommendation. "I love sugar cookies," he said honestly. "Please tell your mama that I'm very grateful for the invitation." As they began their work together, Robert found himself thinking about the Memorial Garden project with increasing excitement and clarity. During his sleepless night, he had begun to sketch out ideas, imagining pathways lined with flowers that would bloom in different seasons, benches placed to take advantage of the morning sun, perhaps a small fountain or water feature that would create a sense of peace and tranquility. "Maya," he said as they worked, "I've been thinking about our garden project. What kinds of flowers do you think Alex would have liked?" Maya's face lit up with enthusiasm. "Oh, he loved sunflowers. He said they were like the sun's babies, always turning their faces toward the light. And he liked morning glories because they opened up fresh every day like new surprises, and butterfly flowers because he said butterflies were like flying rainbows." Robert made mental notes of each suggestion, charmed by the poetic way Maya described her brother's preferences. Alex had clearly been a child who found magic in the natural world, who understood that flowers and trees and wildlife were not just decorative elements, but participants in the ongoing miracle of creation. "What about colors?" Robert asked. "Did he have favorite colors?" Maya thought for a moment, her brow furrowed in concentration. "He liked yellow because it was happy, and purple because it was mysterious, and white because he said it was like a blank page waiting for something beautiful to be written on it. But mostly he liked colors that were mixed together, like when the sunset makes the sky look like someone spilled paint in the prettiest way." Robert found himself smiling at these descriptions, recognizing in them the sensibility of someone who experienced the world through an artist's eyes. Alex had possessed the kind of aesthetic awareness that could find beauty in unexpected combinations, that could see potential for wonder in the most ordinary moments. As they worked their way through the neighborhood, Robert began to share his preliminary ideas for the memorial garden, describing the layout he was envisioning, and asking for Maya's input on everything from the placement of benches to the selection of trees. Maya listened with intense focus, occasionally asking questions that revealed a sophisticated understanding of how outdoor spaces could be designed to serve both practical and emotional needs. "Will there be a place where people can sit quietly if they want to think about people they miss?" Maya asked, as they paused near a particularly beautiful flowering tree. "Absolutely," Robert said. "I was thinking we could create a quiet corner with a special bench, maybe with a small plaque that says something about how love continues even when people go to heaven." Maya clapped her hands together with delight. "Yes! And maybe we could plant some of those flowers that smell really good, so when people sit there they can breathe in something beautiful while they remember their special people." The afternoon tea meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock, and Robert found himself changing clothes 3 times before settling on a casual button-down shirt and khakis that he hoped would strike the right balance between respectful and approachable. He had stopped at the local bakery to pick up a small assortment of pastries, wanting to contribute something to the meal, even though Maya had assured him that her mother was preparing everything they would need. Maya had given him her address, and Robert was surprised to discover that she lived only 6 blocks from his house, in a neighborhood of modest apartments and small houses that he had driven through countless times without really seeing. The contrast between his world and Maya's was stark but not uncomfortable, simply different in the way that different chapters of the same story might be written in different styles. Maya's apartment building was a 2-story structure that had been well maintained despite its age, with small balconies adorned with hanging plants and wind chimes that created a gentle music in the afternoon breeze. Robert climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor, following Maya's directions to apartment 2B, and took a deep breath before knocking on the door. The woman who answered was clearly Maya's mother, sharing the same dark eyes and gentle smile that had captivated Robert from the first moment he saw her daughter. She was younger than Robert had expected, probably in her early 30s, with an air of quiet strength that reminded him immediately of Maya's own composure and dignity. "You must be Robert," she said, extending her hand with genuine warmth. "I'm Carmen Santos. Maya has told me so much about you, and I can't thank you enough for the kindness you've shown her." Robert shook Carmen's hand, immediately struck by the sincerity in her voice and the way her eyes reflected the same depth of character he had recognized in Maya. "The pleasure has been entirely mine, Mrs. Santos. Maya is an extraordinary young woman, and I've learned more from her in 2 days than I have from most people in years." Carmen's smile broadened at this compliment, and Robert could see the fierce maternal pride that lit up her features when her daughter was praised. "Please, call me Carmen, and come in. Maya has been counting the minutes until you arrived." The apartment was small, but immaculately clean, decorated with obvious care and attention to creating a warm, welcoming atmosphere. The living room featured a comfortable couch, adorned with handmade throw pillows, walls hung with children's artwork that Robert assumed must be Maya's and Alex's creations, and a small dining table set with a cheerful tablecloth and mismatched chairs that somehow looked exactly right together. Maya appeared from what Robert guessed was the kitchen, practically bouncing with excitement. "Mr. Robert, you came! Mama made the sugar cookies, and they smell so good, and she made her special tea that tastes like flowers and sunshine." Carmen laughed at her daughter's enthusiasm, placing a gentle hand on Maya's shoulder. "Why don't you help me bring out the tea things while Mr. Robert makes himself comfortable?" As Maya and Carmen bustled around preparing their afternoon tea, Robert found himself studying the artwork on the walls with new understanding. Many of the drawings were clearly Maya's work, featuring bright colors and cheerful subjects like flowers and butterflies and smiling suns. But others showed a more sophisticated artistic sensibility, with careful attention to detail and nuanced use of color that spoke of real talent and training. "Those are Alex's drawings," Carmen said quietly, having noticed Robert's interest. "He was incredibly gifted artistically. His art teacher said he had the potential to be a professional artist someday." Robert felt his chest tighten with familiar grief, recognizing in Carmen's words the particular pain of dreams that would never be realized, potential that would never be fulfilled. "They're beautiful," he said honestly. "You can see his love for the world in every line." Carmen nodded, her eyes soft with memory. "He saw beauty everywhere. Even during his illness, he would draw pictures of the view from his hospital window, finding something wonderful to capture even in the most difficult circumstances." As they settled around the small dining table with steaming cups of tea and a plate of sugar cookies that smelled like vanilla and childhood memories, Robert found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't experienced in years. There was something about Carmen's presence that put him at ease, a quality of gentle acceptance that made him feel welcome without pretense or performance. "Maya tells me you're interested in creating a memorial garden," Carmen said, her voice carefully neutral in the way that suggested she was still evaluating this unexpected development in her daughter's life. Robert set down his teacup and looked directly at Carmen, wanting to convey the sincerity of his intentions. "I am, but I want to be very clear about something. This isn't charity, and it's not some wealthy man's attempt to feel better about himself by throwing money at a problem. Maya has given me something precious, something I didn't even know I was missing. The garden would be as much for me as for anyone else." Carmen studied his face for a long moment, and Robert had the sense that he was being evaluated by someone who had learned to read people's true intentions through hard experience. Whatever she saw in his expression must have satisfied her, because her posture relaxed slightly, and she leaned forward with interest. "Tell me more about what you're envisioning," Carmen said. Robert began to describe his preliminary ideas for the memorial garden, watching Carmen's face carefully for any signs of discomfort or skepticism. But as he talked about sunflowers and morning glories, butterfly gardens and quiet benches, he saw her eyes begin to brighten with the same enthusiasm Maya had shown. "Alex would have loved every bit of that," Carmen said softly. "He always said that the best way to remember people was to create something beautiful that would make other people happy. This sounds like exactly the kind of project he would have wanted to be part of." Maya, who had been listening intently while decorating her sugar cookie with careful precision, suddenly looked up with bright eyes. "Mama, can we tell Mr. Robert about Alex's secret garden dream?" "Cree?" Carmen glanced at her daughter, then back at Robert, as if deciding whether to share something precious and private. After a moment, she nodded. Alex had this dream of creating a garden where children who were sick could come to feel better. Not better in their bodies, necessarily, but better in their hearts. He designed it all in his sketchbook, every path and flower bed and bench. He said that being outside, with beautiful things, was like taking medicine for your soul. Robert felt his breath catch as he realized the profound connection between Alex's dream and the project he was proposing. It was as if Maya's brother had planted a seed of inspiration that was now growing into something larger and more meaningful than Robert had initially imagined. "Would you be willing to show me his sketches?" Robert asked gently. "I think his vision should be part of whatever we create." Carmen's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of joy rather than sadness. "I think Alex would like that very much. He always said that the best ideas were the ones that got shared and grew bigger when other people added their own dreams to them." As Carmen went to retrieve Alex's sketchbook, Maya scooted her chair closer to Robert's and whispered conspiratorially, "I think this is going to be the most beautiful garden in the whole world." Robert smiled down at Maya, feeling a surge of affection for this child who had become such an important part of his life in such a short time. "I think you're right, and I think your brother is going to be very proud of what we create together." When Carmen returned with the sketchbook, Robert found himself looking at the work of a truly gifted young artist. Alex's drawings showed a sophisticated understanding of garden design. With careful attention to the interplay between different plants, the importance of creating spaces for both activity and contemplation, and the way natural elements could be arranged to create feelings of peace and, quote, healing. "These are incredible," Robert said, studying a particularly detailed drawing of a circular garden with pathways radiating out like the spokes of a wheel. Alex had a real gift for understanding how outdoor spaces could serve emotional needs. Carmen beamed with pride. He spent hours working on those designs. Even when he was too weak to get out of bed, he would sketch and plan and dream about all the gardens he wanted to create someday. As they pored over Alex's drawings together, Robert felt a sense of collaboration with this child he had never met, as if Alex were somehow present in the room, adding his own creative vision to their planning process. The sketches revealed a mind that understood the healing power of beauty, the way that natural environments could provide comfort and inspiration to people who were struggling with loss or illness, or simply the ordinary challenges of being human. "I'd like to incorporate as many of Alex's ideas as possible," Robert said. "This feels like a chance to bring his vision to life in a way that will touch many people's lives." Maya clapped her hands together with delight. "It's like Alex is helping us design the garden from heaven." He always said that the best projects were the ones where lots of people work together to make something beautiful. As the afternoon wore on, Robert found himself completely absorbed in the planning process, his usual business-focused mindset giving way to a more creative and collaborative approach. Carmen proved to be an insightful contributor to the discussion, with practical knowledge about gardening and maintenance that complemented Alex's artistic vision and Maya's enthusiasm. "We'll need to think about things like irrigation and seasonal care," Carmen pointed out as they discussed the placement of different flower beds. "And we should choose plants that will attract butterflies and birds, since Alex always loved watching wildlife." Robert made notes of every suggestion, finding himself energized by the collaborative nature of the planning process. In his business life, He was accustomed to making decisions quickly and independently. But this project called for a different approach, one that honored the input and wisdom of others while working toward a shared vision. As the sun began to set and their teacups grew cold, Robert realized that he had spent one of the most fulfilling afternoons of his adult life sitting around a small table in a modest apartment, planning a garden with a woman and child he had known for less than a week. The experience had awakened something in him that had been dormant for years, a capacity for joy and connection that he had almost forgotten. The zest. "I should probably head home soon," Robert said reluctantly, not wanting to overstay his welcome, but also not wanting this magical afternoon to end. Carmen smiled warmly. "You're welcome here any time, Robert. Maya talks about you constantly, and I can see why. You have a good heart, and Alex would have liked you very much." The simple statement touched Robert more deeply than any business compliment ever had. To be told that a child he had never met would have liked him felt like a benediction of sorts, a recognition that he was capable of the kind of authentic human connection that transcended social boundaries and economic differences. As Robert prepared to leave, Maya threw her arms around his waist in an impulsive hug that nearly brought tears to his eyes. "Thank you for wanting to make Alex's garden dream come true," she whispered. "I know he can see us planning it, and he's so happy." Robert hugged Maya back, feeling a paternal protectiveness that surprised him with its intensity. "We're going to make it beautiful," he promised, "the most beautiful garden anyone has ever seen." Over the following weeks, Robert threw himself into the Memorial Garden project with an enthusiasm that amazed his business colleagues and concerned his accountant. He hired the best landscape architects in the city, consulted with horticultural experts about plant selection and garden design, and navigated the complex web of city permits and approvals required for a public park renovation. Throughout the planning process, Robert made sure to include Maya and Carmen in every decision, treating them as equal partners in the project, rather than grateful recipients of his charity. They met regularly to review architect drawings, discuss plant selections, and refine the overall design to ensure that it honored Alex's vision while serving the needs of the broader community. Maya proved to be an invaluable contributor to the design process, with an intuitive understanding of how different elements would work together and a keen eye for details that the professional designers sometimes overlooked. She insisted on including a special area for children to play safely, while their parents enjoyed the more contemplative spaces, and she suggested adding wind chimes to some of the trees to create the kind of gentle brass music that Alex had loved. Carmen's practical knowledge of gardening and maintenance proved equally valuable, helping to ensure that the garden would be sustainable and beautiful for years to come. She volunteered to help coordinate ongoing maintenance, organizing a group of neighborhood volunteers who would help keep the garden thriving long after the initial construction was complete. As the project moved from planning to implementation, Robert found himself spending more and more time in Maya and Carmen's neighborhood, getting to know the community that had shaped such remarkable people. He discovered a network of families who looked out for each other, sharing resources and support in ways that made him realize how isolated he had become in his wealthy enclave. The construction phase of the Memorial Garden project took 3 months, during which Robert visited the site daily to monitor progress and ensure that every detail was executed according to plan. Maya and Carmen accompanied him on many of these visits, watching with growing excitement as Alex's vision began to take physical form in the world. The garden that emerged was more beautiful than any of them had imagined. Curved pathways wound through carefully planned sections of flowers and trees, creating a sense of discovery and wonder as visitors moved through the space. The sunflower section that Maya had requested became a spectacular focal point, with dozens of different varieties creating a golden meadow that seemed to glow in the afternoon light. The butterfly garden that Alex had designed proved to be a masterpiece of ecological planning, with native plants that attracted monarchs and swallowtails, painted ladies in mourning cloaks, creating a living, kaleidoscope of color and movement. A small water feature provided both the sound of gently flowing water and a source of moisture that the butterflies needed to thrive. The quiet contemplation area that Robert had envisioned became a secluded corner with comfortable benches surrounded by fragrant herbs and flowers, with a small plaque that read, "In memory of all those who watch over us with love, may this garden be a place of peace and healing for all who enter." As the grand opening ceremony approached, Robert found himself both excited and nervous about the community response to the garden. He had invested not just money, but his heart in this project, and he wanted desperately for it to serve the healing purpose that Alex had envisioned. The ceremony was scheduled for a Saturday morning in late spring, when the garden would be at its most spectacular. Robert had arranged for a small stage to be set up for speeches, and he had asked Maya to cut the ribbon officially opening the garden to the public. On the morning of the ceremony, Robert arrived early to make final preparations, his stomach fluttering with the kind of nervous excitement he hadn't felt since his first major business presentation decades ago. But this felt different, more personal somehow, as if he were about to share something precious with the world, and could only hope that others would understand its value. Maya and Carmen arrived, dressed in their best clothes, Maya wearing a yellow dress that seemed to echo the sunflowers she had requested for the garden. She carried a small bouquet of flowers that she had picked from their own modest garden, and her face was radiant with anticipation. "Mr. Robert, it's so beautiful!" Maya exclaimed, as she saw the completed garden for the first time since the final plantings had been installed. "Alex would be so proud! Look how the butterflies are already coming to visit!" Indeed, the garden was already attracting wildlife, despite being only newly planted. Butterflies danced among the flowers, birds perched in the young trees, and bees hummed busily among the herb garden that Carmen had helped design. As the ceremony began, and community members gathered to celebrate the opening of the memorial garden, Robert felt a profound sense of completion that had nothing to do with finishing a project and everything to do with finding his place in a larger story of love and service. The mayor spoke about the importance of public spaces that brought communities together. The head of the Parks Department praised the garden's ecological design and sustainable maintenance plan, but it was Maya's speech that brought tears to the eyes of everyone present. Standing at the podium with the confidence of someone much older, Maya spoke clearly and from the heart about her brother's dream of creating beautiful spaces where people could heal and find peace. She talked about the importance of remembering people we love by doing things that would make them proud, and she thanked everyone who had helped turn Alex's vision into reality. "My brother Alex always said that the most important thing in life was to make the world a little bit prettier for everyone else," Maya said, her voice carrying clearly across the gathered crowd. "This garden is how we can do that together. Every flower that blooms here, every butterfly that comes to visit, every person who finds peace sitting on these benches, is a way of saying that love doesn't end when people go to heaven. It just finds new ways to grow." End quote. When Maya cut the ribbon with ceremonial scissors almost too big for her small hands, the crowd erupted in applause that seemed to echo across the entire neighborhood. Robert felt tears streaming down his face as he watched this remarkable child officially open the garden that had brought them all together, the garden that had taught him so much about the true meaning of wealth and success. As families began to explore the garden, children running down the pathways while adults settled onto benches to enjoy the peaceful atmosphere, Robert felt a hand slip into his. Maya had come to stand beside him, her own eyes bright with unshed tears of joy. "Thank you for helping me make Alex's dream come true," she said simply. "I know he's watching, and he's so happy to see all these people enjoying his garden." Robert squeezed Maya's hand gently, feeling a connection to this child and her family that transcended any relationship he had ever experienced. "Thank you for teaching me what it means to truly take care of something," he said. "You've changed my life in ways I'm still discovering." As the sun climbed higher in the sky and the celebration continued around them, Robert looked out at the garden that had grown from a chance encounter on a sidewalk into something that would serve the community for generations to come. He thought about Alex, the boy he had never met, but who had shaped his understanding of what it meant to create beauty in the world. And he thought about David, his own brother whose memory had been awakened by Maya's simple act of service. The memorial garden stood as a testament to the power of love to transcend death, to the importance of community in healing individual wounds, and to the way that small acts of kindness could grow into something magnificent when nurtured by people who understood that the most important work in life was the work of caring for each other. As Robert watched children play among the flowers that Alex had dreamed of, as he saw elderly couples finding comfort on benches surrounded by the fragrance of herbs and blooming trees, As he witnessed the daily miracle of strangers becoming friends in a space designed for healing and peace, he understood that Maya had been right from the very beginning. Taking care of beautiful things really did make them take care of you back. The garden that had begun as a way to honor the memory of two brothers had become a source of healing and connection for an entire community, proving that love, when expressed through service, had the power to transform not just individual lives, but entire neighborhoods, entire ways of being in the world. And every morning, as Robert continued his new routine of walking through the garden with Maya, checking on the flowers and greeting the early visitors who had come to find peace among the sunflowers and butterflies, he gave thanks for the torn plastic bag and the small girl who had taught him that the most important work in life was also the simplest. Making the world a little bit prettier for everyone else, one small act of love at a time.